you know,
Yeah, sounds right. From a scientific point of view, we talk about it in terms of materials coming together and crossing to a production of hybrids. Hybrids form mixed forms. And in the period of time in the late 1800s when hybridity was under discussion, there was a lot of work also going on within the sciences to get at the underlying mechanisms of hybridization and what was going on. So Mendel's work in the 1860s and the reintroduction of that to a wider audience in the early 1900s provided an understanding of mechanisms whereby material was inherited and from different individuals, how it's segregated and how different forms then were generated. And that provides objective hypothesis and testable scenarios in which to actually further go into the process of hybridity.
My interest in the term hybridity is from a cultural studies point of view, where people use the term hybridity to dislodge the certain sort of fixities that are built around or kind of used for people to sustain their own identities as part of a group, a fixed group. And so hybridity comes in as a way to sort of critique that notion that people have fixed and distinct identities, and that therefore cultures are also fixed and distinct. And so the term hybridity comes in cultural theory in terms of how people study culture, and from the 1980s onwards really, and it comes into sort of quite good effect thinking through the legacy of colonialism, and more particularly the post-colonial milieu in which everybody lives now. So this idea of hybridity is used as a means to sort of resist the permanence of the colonial legacy, because it sets itself up as fixing particular identities, and so through decolonization that whole idea of fixity and permanence is disrupted, and so it enables people to think about that much more fluid space in which people sort of perform themselves as members of groups in society, in politics, in culture, in art, in all different kinds of fields.
I mean, some of the issues on this are, I suppose, it will include the idea that if we're involved in an organic process of hybridization via globalization, the porousness of societies, immigration, these sorts of things, to what extent political philosophy, either as embodiments of say modernist liberal approaches or kind of Pareckian multicultural approaches, which would place great emphasis on dialogue within the public sphere and recognition, how far these moral orientations actually impact on these processes at all. I mean, in other words, that there will be things going on irrespective of the desire of the froth and political philosophers and what they wish to achieve. But presuming that they have some effect, presuming if you hold principles that enable debates, whether or not actually a multiculturalist line tends to essentialize identities, or whether it, does by saying that you're going to give respect to particular communities, does that actually foster greater dialogue and hybridization, or is that actually a way of, in some sense, reifying groupings? So there's a question of which of these approaches is optimal in terms of perhaps dialogue, if that's the goal. There's also a risk of conflict in the sense that
on those terms, because my background is also built up upon diversity and I blame it all on my mother because she built this sort of home ground for us to think about identity and diversity in a very non-hierarchical way. So even though I might be of Chinese descent in terms of ancestry, there was never a sense of centrality when it comes to being Chinese, because when you grow up in a place like Malaysia and your best friends are of all different races and different cosmologies and different religions, you just don't tend to see place people in a sense of levels or hierarchy anymore. And in that sense, I feel very much like you do. I feel like I spent most of my life enjoying the sense of everyone's different, and so we learn more from each other, and we learn more from looking at our similarities and differences, and celebrating everyone's sort of different understanding and pulling it together to have a broader view of things. And I kind of am wary of dogmatic rules and regulations and nationalism, as you said.
For at least 8 years, I had a particular view of the world that was intolerant of differing opinions, intolerant of contesting opinions, and through a process of disillusionment, confronting contradictions. First of all, contradictions in what I was in the practice around me, in the Pentecostal community, and then subsequently contradictions in these apparent contradictions in the scriptures. I evolved beyond that particular worldview into a more hybrid, we might say, understanding of things, understanding of the world.
Come as an art historian interested in early periods, medievalist, and there's a long tradition that starts way before the Middle Ages of hybrid images, which are assembling creations of the human and the non-human, or human and the animal, as a way of peopling the nether regions of the world, or imagining what's there, or imagining what's between the world and the sky, or between the life and the afterlife, and representing it as something that is both controllable and uncontrollable, and knowable and unknowable, and full of mystery, but actually something that we can imagine. And that world existing in medieval maps, it existed at the edge of the known world.